my biggest fear and concern is that companies don't even know this when they start. They're on the blind baby tiger, roller coaster, and they don't even realize that they can check for the very thing in 6 months they're going to get hurt by. They could know on day one.
Hello and welcome to the VisibleThread Optimized podcast. As artificial intelligence takes center stage, the question arises, can machines truly replace human judgment and creativity in the complex realm of federal contracting? Join us in this episode, It Still Requires a Human to Read It, where we explore the intersection of AI and federal contracting. I'm Marsha Watson, CEO of BTW & Company. Our panelists today, Noelle Russell and Fergal McGovern, bring a wealth of experience and expertise to the table. Noelle is an award-winning technologist, has worked at the forefront of AI innovation in companies like Accenture, AWS, and Microsoft. Happy to have you, Noelle.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks.
Absolutely. Fergal is the founder and CEO of VisibleThread. He works closely with VisibleThread's strategic customers to deploy AI. He is passionate about clear communication and the role of humans in the digital age. Welcome, Fergal. Good to see you.
Thanks so much, Marsha. Great to be here.
Well, let's go ahead and get started because this is going to be an interesting conversation, and I'm really excited for it. So, Noelle, given your diverse experience at companies like Accenture, AWS, and NPR, what was the most surprising or unexpected aspect of working in the AI field?
I would probably say maybe how long it took us to get to this point. My first foray into the world of AI, I got an opportunity to join one of Jeff Bezos's earliest teams in the world of AI that was going to eventually make it to production. Lots of times we tried, but it did not go very well. But this one worked out. And this was the Amazon Alexa team. And I was employee 10 on that product. I built over 100 apps. And so I was all in. I'm all excited. But this was 10 years ago. And I would spend the next 10 years on stages all over the world trying to encourage people to start using AI. And it didn't really kick in until, as we all know, a couple of years ago. But I always say, hey, maybe the world wouldn't be as interested in ChatGPT if they didn't spend the last 8 to 10 years fighting with their Siris and Alexas and Googles along the way.
It's probably true. There's a lot to be said in there. So, taking that spin, Fergal, as the founder of a company focused on RFP software and working with 11 of the top 15 government contractors, how have your largest customers approached AI?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, Marsha, and I think it's kind of very variable, and it's somewhat emblematic of what Noelle just talked about. I kind of look at AI almost the dark ages of AI. AI has been around for 40 plus 50 years. I mean, Alan Turing coined the idea in the 40s and 50s. There have been a ton of false starts in AI. Just technology that promised a lot, probably oversold to an extent, but didn't quite deliver the expectation. ChatGPT arrives on the scene November 2022, getting my years mixed up, so 2 years ago, basically, and introduced a certain type of AI basically based on a thing called a transformer model, which effectively originally was invented by Google in 2017, but they kind of let it sit on the shelf, and then OpenAI kind of used this technology to make some really interesting and powerful results, and it really cut through the noise. So that kind of brought almost this unprecedented attention to what quickly became a very hype cycle type thing, which doesn't mean it's all bad. It just means that there was a huge amount of excitement. And then the question is, well, what can it really do? So as we work with enterprises, I think they're at the what can we really do with this thing phase. And the progression from a technology standpoint is phenomenal. So what we're seeing is that the most thoughtful leadership in enterprise, we work a lot with, small to medium business, of course, and mid-size and enterprise, but the big enterprises, they are looking to standardize their kind of large language model posture. They're looking to put together the infrastructure, the scaffolding that will allow them provision this internally. They have a huge concern about security and the implication of PII, personally identified information, going into the models. That's a huge concern, irrespective of whether it's valid or not. And most serious kind of companies operating in this space of government contracting already have a pretty good posture when it comes to kind of privacy of data. And I think what's slightly different in this ecosystem that we operate in is that you really can't use public cloud AI, generative AI, irrespective of how fantastic it is. Once you put anything into the public cloud, the alarm bells go off for information security. Enterprise get concerned about that. So the most thoughtful leaders are actually provisioning internally. That would probably move to, internal private clouds. It'll probably move to Amazon provisioning, turnkey approaches for private clouds. But they're controlling their own data. And security is job number one for these guys. So you can't, if you're doing defense and space, or you're in kind of healthcare and HIPAA constraints, or you're in, compliance, financial services type activities, you just can't take the risk. So you can't just kind of willy-nilly whack things into the public cloud and expect that to be okay.
It is such a risk. So, Noelle, if you could take that further, because I think I've been very vocal about that, and Fergal, you and I have talked about that. How do you trust that your employees, your folks, your workers are not going to go into that public cloud, because it is such an easy button right now? And how do you put those things out there of yes, but, or no, and, how do you get those things communicated, understanding the risk in, what the implications are of putting, business data into the cloud?
100%. Yeah, I think one of the things that I have witnessed over hundreds of conversations over the last 2 years is CEOs are like, first, they're like, help me understand what we're dealing with here, so that they could just even conceptualize, like, are we going to do this? Are we not? There was a lot of hemming and hawing over whether or not it's a good investment. But now we know, the IDC just recently re-reported a study that they finished at the end of 2023, but now as we close into the end of 2024, have now re-released this study that's confirmed that for every dollar you put into a responsibly built AI system, you can get up to $3 back conservatively. And that there are even some specific use cases where you can get $8 back. Like, that's ridiculous returns. But the key is in, the devil's always in the details, right? How do you ensure that you're building a system that is responsibly built? And that what that means is that, these CEOs would always ask me, how do I make sure I build a system that won't hurt me, won't hurt my customer, that I won't get fired for using, that how do we make sure that these organizations are set up for success as they go on this potentially new journey, certainly away from the research grounds in which a lot of this was started? And the number one thing I tell people is very easy to do is, and it actually kind of builds on top of what you said, Fergal, is the opportunity that we have to just give our employees one instruction, and that is to create a system so that when they're using a generative AI model, they look up into the URL of the browser they're in, and it should say the company's domain name, right? Like, company X GPT, federal X GPT, FHS, like whatever it is, whatever organization, you create an internalized, and that's exactly, I think, what you were saying as well, like an internal version of this. And the benefit of that is that it's a super easy rule and it's very easy to identify, but it also creates a really easy way for an enterprise, an IT organization, to prevent, like you said, it's very tempting to just be like, well, I've got ChatGPT here, right? It creates an opportunity for an IT organization to really focus on building firewall rules that create reminders to organizational employees, hey, that's not where we go for this. The other thing I think, so one, of course, just create an infrastructure that supports internal innovation with these tools that protects your data. And that's I say maybe it's simple, maybe it's not that easy depending on how bureaucratic your organization is in provisioning these internal systems, but it is a simple solution. But the other thing is it's more cultural. than it is technology based, right? Like having the tech protected, sure. But one of the things that is most concerning about AI systems is a lack of intention when even building them. And so when your employees use a system, if the leadership doesn't realize that just by using a system, you're training it. Just by talking to a machine, you're training it on how to not only ask questions, but also to create answers. And if you are not really clear on your core values, on what you're trying to use that system for, the model can get confused about what truth is, what harmfulness is, what helpfulness is. And you really have to establish, so protecting yourself and risk, it looks very different in the world of AI. It's not just kind of cybersecurity and compliance risk, it's also organizational clarity. And I think that is going to surprise a lot of enterprises, is how clear they need to be as a company about what they want to do and how they want to do it, and how clearly they can articulate that to a machine so it can help amplify that work.
Yeah. And I look at it in some ways when you're using that information that is fed from your internal system, I almost start to think you're cloning the English language, right? Especially in building these Gen AI systems, that if the language going in isn't great or the language that you're feeding it isn't great, then your outputs are going to reflect the quality of what you're putting
Garbage in, garbage out. That's right.
Absolutely. And then, starting with your data to begin with, right? So what, Fergal, can organizations, what steps can they take to ensure that they have the high quality data going into their system to be able to function effectively?
Sure. So it's exactly as Noelle says, garbage in, garbage out. Now, it's not all doom and gloom in one sense. If we think about tangible reality when it comes to, people operating in the federal contracting space, they tend to have already kind of folders built out. And mostly it's SharePoint. So SharePoint is the dominant player in this area. They'll have a folder or a system of record for past performance. They'll have a system record for their resumes. They'll have a lot of stuff, and it'll be kind of housed. Now, it may be a little mucky and a little bit not very clean and unhygienic, let's call it, but it's probably not too bad. So what vendors need to do, so there's kind of two elements here. One is, are you going to bake your own? Are you going to build your own stuff? Now, I've met a few companies who've tried that. I'm not sure if this is not an AI question. Most government contractors are not in the business of building software products. It's not their core DNA. It's not something that, and most people tend to underestimate the effort and overestimate the fickleness and the brittleness of those systems. So that's question number one. Are you a product vendor or not? In truth, if your business is to win multi-million-dollar or multi-billion-dollar programs, you're probably not really well suited to be in the product business. So then you're into, well, what products do we think about that will actually work in our organization? And to Noelle's point, everything changes with AI and nothing changes. It's still a people, process, technology question. So it's your people and your process and what steps you can actually adopt to then leverage that data you've got. Back to the garbage in, garbage out question. The technique by which this is working, and just in basic terms, generative AI is powered by an LLM, a large language model. That's evolving fast. There are new techniques around chain of thought type models, particularly with the latest stuff from OpenAI. But simply put, it's basically LLM. The LLM doesn't have any insight into your proprietary data. So you use a technique called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, to link it to that data. And that informs the results. So if I point my RAG-enabled system, which VisibleThread has, that capacity in its VT Writer product, if I point it and I say, well, I want to create a management plan. So create a management plan and base it on this set of documents. It's kind of human scale stuff. Well, yeah, we wrote 5 really good ones there last year. Just base my management plan on those 5. So as long as you're able to choose the 5 or say, use the data that are tagged with this thing, final 1 submission for whatever, then you can inform and you can actually ground the results from the LLM, aka Gen AI, with a more specific response that's much more suitable for your domain. So it's actually, if you break it down, it's LLM combined with RAG, combined with somewhat clean repository stuff, typically in SharePoint. And as long as the product is well designed, and we would like to say that our products are pretty well designed, then actually normal people who have got a lot more to be doing than learning products can get on with their job and get pretty good quality outputs. But the key point is the more specific the ask, the better the result. The more specific the pointing you do into SharePoint, the better the result, because there is diminishing returns. If you say, okay, the magic bullet here, or the silver bullet will be press a button, create an entire proposal, that's nuts. It's completely crazy stuff. On the other hand, if you say, well, there's section 3.2.4, it asks me about X. Where have we done X before? And would you please look at this part of my repository to inform what the Gen AI comes back with? Well, that's a winning proposition. But you still have to evolve it. You still have to work it through, but it gets you off the blank page much faster. So that's where the kind of 8X empowerment can often happen. And I completely agree with Noelle on this. The huge issue, I think we've moved on, thankfully, from the point at which people thought it was silver bullet land. It's going to displace everything. Microsoft Word will no longer exist. Email will not. It was nuts stuff. Now we're into much more realism. We're into, yes, it will do certain things and do them really well. So I think the data thing is part of the overall equation. It is a people process question as well. And you do need to identify kind of, you might call it tiger teams or people with ambition, cross-functional in your organization, put them together and actually have them very specifically focus on a certain set of key use cases, known use cases that today you're probably doing by hand, and then map technology to that. So that's the winning way, at least in my experience with this kind of stuff.
That makes a lot of sense. And in that sense, too, looking at that silver bullet philosophy, right? I think you also have to come with a healthy dose of cynicism or, pessimism in some way. And you need to be able to look at, what the AI puts out and examine that self-critical perspective of what the outputs are. So preventing that garbage in, garbage out, Noelle, I'm sure you've seen case study and case study and case study of what happens when AI gets it wrong. But what are you seeing maybe in that sense of how does that disrupt the workplace? How does that lead to issues or when a company is not a software developer and they find themselves kind of doing this DIY, let's see what we can do. What are some of the pitfalls and risks that are preventive or that you've seen, they give folks the idea of maybe let the professionals take control over that?
My gosh, it's like I could have asked you to ask me this question and I didn't. So it's really cool because I have to show you how I describe this to people. But basically about, 8 years ago, I was invited to Microsoft because I'd done my magic at Amazon Alexa and got the world knowing what it was. I think we're at 100 million homes. So I felt pretty good about it. And then Microsoft was deciding to launch a bunch of brand new models. And in a very similar way that everyone now is like, ooh, AI models, let's do that. And I actually coined this term. Do you see this little guy? His name's Bruiser. So I started to think about these as little baby tigers. So I got 17 little baby tigers at Microsoft, and they were tiny, cute little models. And this is literally where most companies are today. The listeners are probably oh my gosh, we have a baby model. Where we go and we use a model and we usually will find one little thing that it's good at and be very excited that it can do that thing. And we're hyper focused on that. So for example, even in RFPs, one of the earliest projects that I got to work on was RFPs, just having an RFP read one and give you advice. That's one tiny little thing. But for an organization that never had that insight before, especially based on not only the successful RFPs, but also the worst RFPs that could now inform, right? You writing a better introduction or a better closing or whatever. This insight was huge, but it was also very fractional. It was just a tiny part of the process. Baby Tiger AI kind of represents the stage that we're in when we're building models, and we're very excited about it. It's super cute. Everyone wants to get involved, but no one's really thinking about this tiger in a way that I think about it, which is little tiger, look at your paws. How big are you going to be? Or razor sharp teeth. What will you be eating forever? What data are you going to need, to your point earlier, right? How big are you going to be? What's your infrastructure going to look like? How are you going to maintain robustness and all of these qualities? How are you going to just take care of it? I became a rescue cat owner over COVID. And I realized when I go to rescue a cat, I don't know if you know this, but they interview you. They ask you all these questions what are you going to do with your cat? Where are they going to live? How are you going to feed it? Are you going to declaw it? What's going to happen when you don't want it anymore? And I'm it's homeless. I just want to take it home. I'm shocked at the fact that they asked. But now, of course, as a 5-time cat owner, I understand why they ask those questions. And now I'm shocked as an AI professional that we don't ask the same questions of people adopting an AI model. You should ask these questions. It's kind of like what you were saying earlier about like, first, you need to know why are you using this, but then ask two very important questions. One, what's the best thing that could happen? Like, how many homes could we be in? How many people might use this? But then also be courageous enough to ask, what's the worst thing that could happen? Who could get hurt, killed, like, unfair treatment, whatever it is. And the funny or maybe unfortunate part of that is that the people on the team that build the thing are rarely the people who would know how to answer those questions. And that enters this desire and need. I love that you said tiger teams. I was like, I totally love tiger teams. Oh, but I agree. Like tiger teams now, they end up being very different than kind of what we did in the past. They were like SWAT teams that went in and solved a specific problem. Now they're going to be what we call AI red teams. And these tiger teams are formed not just as kind of specialists in the technology problem that we're trying to solve, but now they become business domain specialists. They become people who are representative of our customer, our partner, our ecosystem, other parallel or partnering or sister agencies. Like all these organizations now become required because they're going to know much better than us building the solution, how an end user will be impacted by what we're building. So creating these teams inside your organization. And if you ask people who would like to test a model to make sure it doesn't hurt anyone, you will get lots of people who care about this problem. You don't have to go hire this team, though, of course, you can. But it's better, at least, even if you do outsource your red teaming activity, that you bring in people in the organization who are tightly associated with the problem to actually solve it. So, yeah, I love that. The idea of, everyone is in this world now building these baby models, adopting these models. They don't really understand what's going to happen with them. They like these features we keep getting new features. And I tell people, unless you're actually watching the features that are getting released, you won't even know how fast even the thing you bought is evolving right out from underneath you. Before, we used to get to wait a year or at least 6 months, and there would be like a release date. Like now, we're in iterative releases. So you have to have a team that's going to care about this, watch how the product's evolving, and ensure that the problem you're trying to solve evolves with that technology evolution. And that's an intentional effort. And it's very personal. Like it's a human effort, not a machine one. So I think that's an exciting part of what gives us all job security, right? Like humans aren't going anywhere because someone has to be there to tell the model, this is what's right. This is what's wrong. This is what is good for humanity. This is what's going to hurt people. Like humans will do that work. And I don't see a future anywhere close that's going to replace that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important too for the humans to recognize that is their responsibility when working with this tool. So that's going to segue great into the next level of the conversation because I am all about the humans. And so given that AI is predictive and non-deterministic, what types of tasks in government contracts should always remain human-driven? Fergal, I'm going to toss that one to you.
Great. So I think like everything, it's kind of when you unpack this a little bit more and get into the weeds of this stuff, you have to look at it from the point of view of the process steps that are typical in this world that we operate in. So what happens when, even Marcia, if you think about what happens when actually a large RFP drops, you'll read the document, you'll start to look for certain elements in the document that may or may not give you pause. You may look, if you're a contracts person, you might look for indemnification clauses, or you might look for conflict of interest clauses. You might look, if you've got a supply chain, you might look for flow down clauses. On the contract side, if you're a proposal person, you'll probably start to begin to itemize all the factors and sub-factors and, section L, section M, section C, all these things. So you're starting to review. Now, AI can completely speed that up, but I'll give you a very simple example, and this is very concrete. If you want to search accurately for, let's say, a term, so NASA soup, which is a very large, Noelle, I'm not sure if you're familiar with NASA soup, but it's kind of one that many people on this, listening to this pod, I suspect, will be very aware of. It's, 60 billion plus or minus? It's a large effort, right? And it's one of Soup 6, so it's one of a long line of NASA contract vehicles that are very important. And of course, there's a lot of people focused on that. And Alliant 3, Oasis Plus, there's a whole heap of these things, and they're very, very large elephant type contracts. And out of those troughs, there will be multiple dollars available. If I'm looking at these things and I need to be 100% accurate around the exact requirements, because that will mean that I'm either down selected or not, I really don't want to use generative AI for that task. So for instance, if you open up NASA Soup, the latest drop, and I know it's a little bit, now they're projecting maybe the end of this year. If I search for the word cybersecurity, for example, in Microsoft Word, I will get 27 occurrences of that word. And it'll show me exactly where it is. That is quote unquote deterministic software. That is a pattern match search going on underneath the covers. If I open up Copilot, which again is a Microsoft product, and open it up in the add-in in Microsoft Word, and I ask how many occurrences of cybersecurity are in this doc, I may get the answer 3 or 10 or 22 or 5 or none. And every time I run that, I may get and will get a different answer, because there's a configuration setting in large language models that varies the results, because it is a creative thing. So there's certain tasks that are fantastically suitable for applying Gen AI to, and certain tasks that you wouldn't use it ever. Search is a good example of the I wouldn't use it ever. Would I use it, but particularly in this case, if I'm looking for indemnification clauses on a contract, I want to make damn sure I cover them all out and make sure we check against all of them, because they are really important. So I wouldn't use generative AI to, type in a chatbot, give me all the occurrences of indemnify, because I wouldn't get an accurate result. So that's where deterministic software comes in. It's 100% accurate. It's 100% repeatable. Those are two important characteristics. Gen AI, by definition, and transformer models, which are the underpinning of this architecture, don't behave like that quite correctly. They're for more generative, creative tasks where good enough is fine. So what would you use it for? I might throw in that NASA Soup thing and say, give me roughly the key ideas going on in this contract. Roughly, weasel words going on here. But I get a decent sense of this. So summarization is fantastically, that's where AI really shines. It's predictive, but it's okay, because then I, as a human being, make the judgment. And that's the human in the loop idea, which is this famous phrase. And that's where, Noelle is talking about, I think we can all agree, humans are not gone. There are certain tasks that we do that software can make much easier and better. Like, you've no business going in by hand looking for acronyms that are misspelled. I mean, why would you want to do that? Software is way better at doing that. It's a dumb task, but why spend 3 hours on a 150-page doc checking that? And then the doc changes and you got to recheck it again. It's a waste of time. So let's free people up to do things in a more strategic way. I think irrespective of whether it's AI or not Gen AI, these systems are becoming a hybrid. There's been AI in Microsoft Word for a long, long time. And now there's generative AI in droves in most products. So most products are actually hybrids. There's, if I sign into a system, that's deterministic software. That's not Gen AI. You don't guess that, you can sign into a system or not. It's not a guess. It's a simple yes or no answer, and it's logically based. And that's the difference between Gen AI. Gen AI is not based on logic. It's based on predictions and probabilities. It's just a fundamentally different thesis.
Emphasizing that concept of a guess, I think is where, again, the nuance of what this tool is actually designed to do. It's not to answer, it is to guess. It is to say, when asked this chain of words, this is the chain of words that most appropriately respond to that question. But is it the right chain of words? Is it the right context? Is it appropriate for the audience you are then giving that chain of words to? So do we think that there is a risk of becoming too reliant on AI when it comes to critical decision making? I mean, I really do think that there's that face value risk. The AI said it, therefore it's true. I always say, just because an RFP exists doesn't mean you should bid on it. And now to say that, but I can because the AI is going to tell me what to say. Please.
This is an amazing thought, because this gets into behavioral economics and kind of human psychology. We people tend to trust what software or systems give us. The famous case, nothing to do with AI. Google Maps, you tap in your location and suddenly you find yourself driving off a pier because Google Maps has told you to drive off a pier. And people have literally almost done that because we all trust this thing. So we have a bias towards trust. We trust systems. And the danger with Gen AI is that you have to trust but verify what comes back. And that's okay. But this is the education that all organizations have to go on a journey towards. It's educating people as to, yes, this is how it operates. Not everything will be absolute. You just need to use your judgment to make sure that what it's giving you back is appropriate and good. Now, citations and lots of evolution, I mean, the technology is evolving so fast that the amount of hallucinations are dramatically reduced, even in the last 2-3 months. And now we have the latest models from from OpenAI, where they are putting a simple question into a sequence of kind of steps where it's forcing it to be thoughtful. So this is now approaching a more thoughtful and thinking type approach within AI or Gen AI. So you're going to see a lot better results coming back. But the pace, and this is for us as product vendors, we stay LLM agnostic. That means we're not hitching our wagon to any particular LLM quite deliberately, because the literal pace by which this stuff is evolving and getting so much better is astounding. Like, we just put out support for Mistral Nemo, which is a very nice LLM from a company called Mistral. We swapped out Llama 3. Like, we're switching and swapping in our public cloud because we do have customers using our public cloud. But that's where enterprises will need to, and we're finding it more and more. They're settling into a variety of different large language models, which they will expose. Some are actually building custom wrappers, and they're exposing it to all their kind of internal clients, including products like us. So it's kind of, the evolution is incredible here. But people are getting much more realistic about what it can do and where it shouldn't be used.
So, Noelle, can you a little bit deeper in some of what those limitations are, or from your experience to where we got to now, do you have any predictions for maybe what might be coming?
Well, I definitely do, only because I think I've been saying it for a really long time, and we are now closer to doing those things today than we've ever been. But some of the things I think that I have seen an interest really blossom over the last year is in understanding and education. So for years, I would always say I'm feeding vegetables to kids when it comes to building responsible AI solutions. Like, I'd go into an organization and I would have to find that one champion who cared about building systems that were intentional and like were secure and robust and explainable. And as long as I could find that one, I would be able to go in and impact the organization. Now I'm finding that most organizations in general, and thankfully, to your point earlier, I actually do watch the stories. I usually get called into a client after an AI gone wrong situation has occurred, where they were like, "Oh, we didn't think that was going to happen," and they didn't think, they didn't ask the question. So there's a couple things that I've realized in these workshops that we do that are critical to long-term success with AI. And one of them is around accuracy in understanding, like, one thing that I think we've gotten into the habit of in enterprise software is that we buy software and then we just we use it as is. We aren't super like, "Hey, this isn't working. You should fix this." Or we've been taught that even if we do say that, maybe in 6 months it shows up, or maybe it doesn't. There's zero feedback loop. The challenge with AI and challenging that mindset is that it is 100% dependent on a human feedback loop. The quality of your model is like linked directly to the quality of the individuals using your model and providing human feedback. So the concept with LLMs is called, reinforcement learning with human feedback. Models only get better when you provide your users the ability to say, "Oh, that was a good answer," or "No, this wasn't." And in those cases, usually users, like people listening now, would probably be like familiar with this kind of symbol, right? A thumbs up, thumbs down. But that is kind of like the poor man's version, right? Where we're just saying it's black and it's white, it's yes or it's no. And many times we get an answer and we're like, I mean, we've even said it here, like, yeah, it's pretty good. And pretty good in government, in finance, in healthcare isn't going to quite cut it. And what I've watched is organizations in their infancy of using these models in baby tiger mode is that they immediately go, oh, well, we can't use it for that. We can't do that because it's not able to get the level of accuracy we need. And what they don't realize is that, to your point earlier, Fergal, it's a hybrid solution. You can use generative AI to create a better interaction with everybody. Everyone would rather talk in human language than machine language. I say that, and then there's those of us who, rebuilt the Linux kernel on a Friday night for fun. So we might like talking to machines more, but everyone else in the world that is now using things like ChatGPT would much rather just say, hey, give me the sales statistics for Italy in March, and who is the sales guy or girl or woman associated with that? Like, these are the questions. I just want to ask the question and have a machine go and find me the answer. And this is true across any domain, any industry. And what we're challenged with, I think, today is organizations, they're using these super small use cases to ground whether or not AI is a good idea. And they don't really realize that it is 100% going to provide you the answer you ask it for. The challenge is in the clarity of the question that you ask. We call it prompt engineering in our space. Everyone, though, is a prompt engineer. Anyone who opens up ChatGPT and talks to it is becoming a prompt engineer. And so I believe, at least in our workshops, I always say you have to, in order to understand AI, you have to build AI. And this is true for everyone. Everyone has to understand how to build an AI system end to end. And the good news is, because of today's technology, you can do that in less than 4 hours. Like, it's very simple to do. But do you understand, like, when you build your own system, like, say you build it for a local dentist, right? You're like, I have a dentist. They never rebook my appointment when I want them to. I'm going to build them a chatbot. They never even need to know. But the process of prompting a model to do scheduling will show you, like, well, where's it going to get the schedule? How's it going to know that that's right? What if I ask it about taxes? Why did it give me an answer about taxes when it's a dentist? Oh, because I never told the model that that's not okay. I go tell the model it's not okay. Learning these are now it's like human rights level type literacy that we have to create amongst our workforce. Like, I think you're right, Fergal, the whole leadership of the world, at least of the world's biggest companies, is very well aware of what's possible now. The challenge is that the people that work for those people are not getting the same level of literacy. I'm not in those rooms. I'm in I always say I go from the boardroom to the whiteboard to the keyboard. And most of my conversations over the last 2 years have been in the boardroom, have been in the executive ranks. And I'm trying to encourage, like I said, vegetables to kids. Hey, you have to train your workforce. But the good news is that now, based on the report that came from the IDC that I mentioned, now we can see that in less than 6 months, you can get a 300% or 3 times ROI. Now I can prove in 6 months that it's worth educating your workforce. Worth it. If you do that, you will get that money back. And so, to just maybe wrap that up in a bow, one of the most important things an organization can do is identify, kind of to the question you asked, Fergal, around tasks. I went into the Metropolitan Museum of Art and got an opportunity to bring 9 data scientists from MIT. And we went to the curators of the Met and we said, come on in, we're going to do a hackathon. We're going to all sit in a room and we're going to use tech to solve your problems. And it was like an awkward high school dance where the business people were on one side and the data technology people were on this side. And they were like, I remember the curators being like, I feel like we're good. When we asked them, what hurts you? How can we help? They're like, yeah, I feel like we're good. Anything we need to do, we as humans need to do it. And that is the initial visceral response when you're like, hey, I got AI for that. I got an app for that. But what we ended up doing over the course of that time is we ended up building trust with them and really asking them, hand on shoulder, intensely interested in their success, and ask them, what do you wake up and go, I hate doing this. This part of my job is annoying. This app is 20 years old. This process takes 15 weeks to complete. I don't even want to start it. What part of what you do in your day steals your joy, and what do you want to keep? And that's the most important human decision we make. What do we want to keep? Because in the world of AI, we can delegate even the most important human decisions. We can delegate if we want to. Is it dangerous? Yes. Should we? No. But we could. So the burden is on us as individuals to decide, how do I want to delegate to a machine? And that task identification, if you do it right, the workers, the people doing the work, are ecstatic to give that work away, right? For example, doing document generation for a lot of these like FDA processes. I think it's a 1,200 page doc you have to submit if you're a life sciences organization and want to submit. Only 80 pages require human intervention, like human work. The rest is just nonsense. And this is again coming from life science professionals. They're like, if you could get rid of that, that would be amazing. So we can focus on the work that is necessary in those 80 pages to prove that what we're doing will change the world. And now I go in and go, no problem. I can build an AI system that will do that work enough. So you spend 20% of your time on the 1,200 pages and 80% of your time on the 80. But that requires you sitting down and looking at what part of your job don't you want to do, or what part of your job do you want to delegate, and then building or using, to your point, Fergal, like the product, like using products or building products that support those tasks you want to delegate. Because then you'll free up time and now you can train those models better, but also you'll have time to increase the value of the workers in the company.
Yeah, I'm going to take that to a very weird analogy, but it's what popped in my head, Noelle, as you were talking. I remember, and it's generational in my family. If you ask one of us a question, we will give you an answer. Is it going to be right? Nope. But we will answer it anyway. So as my boys were growing up, and they're sitting in the backseat in their car seats asking, hey, Mom, how does this work? Hey, Mom, what does that do? Hey, Mom, what's going on over here? And I would answer. I have no idea. But now, my son is a mechanical engineer and he's asking questions. And the answer is, I don't know. You have to figure that out on your own. And does he go to ChatGPT? Sometimes. Does he go to Google? Sometimes. Does he go to YouTube? All the time. And so it's, how do you use the information that's being given to you? Is it trust it, know it? Mom said it's true, so it must be true. I realized the damage I was doing there. But when I send him to other places to conduct that research, he has to know what's appropriate and what's not in what he gets back in an answer. And it really is kind of taking that juvenile perspective with what the humans are learning right now. We're starting over in how we need to educate ourselves to be able to use this tool to continue to have it be used effectively. So I'm going to flip the conversation back now so that when the humans are using these tools to create their answers, shortcut the process for sure. What has to stay in the human, area? There's, 80 out of 1,200 pages. That's fantastic. Let's flip it. Now the government gets that document back. How do they know what of those 1,200 pages was the original human thought? How do they know what was automatically generated because of the efficiencies that it gains? And how does it differentiate between this is a standard answer, I know I can accept it, or, I know that this answer needed a great deal of consideration. How do I know that it got it? That's very existential, I think, in some ways. Fergal, where do you kind of see that gray area between what the humans are creating and then submitting for evaluation? Not yet thinking that the government is using AI to evaluate. We're still thinking they're using humans, at least for the next 2-3 months.
Oh, no. Anyway, we can talk about it later.
Yeah.
I'm going to think from a majority. They haven't picked it up yet, but the lag is not far.
So I'm going to give a controversial and slightly contrarian answer on this. It doesn't matter. Why the heck does it matter? And I'll give you a simple analogy. If I do a complicated math sum and I use a calculator or a pen and paper and I give you the answer and the answer is correct, why would you care whether it's done using a calculator or by hand? So it is impossible. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in the world of politicians, particularly around the regulation side of AI. The task order that came out last year had certain, let's call it interestingly strange and brittle tests in it that are already like dark age stuff, particularly around size of models. It's just a naive approach. This is a personal viewpoint, by the way, not an official viewpoint. But it doesn't matter, because the other point that I don't think people understand is that in general, there are some minor exceptions, but in general, it is impossible to detect AI-generated content. Because let's strip it all back to the basic principle by which Gen AI works. I've got a sequence of words. So I always use the example, the dog chased the fill in the blank, right? So the dog chased the cat, or the tiger. In the case of Noelle, we're very big fans of tigers, so maybe the dog is silly and is a puppy and hasn't a clue what it's chasing. Or is it a bird? Or is it a car? Or is it a bus? They're all right, but it just depends. So all it's doing in essence is fundamentally predicting the next word in a sequence of words, or if it's something like a Sora or kind of a graphic stuff, it's the next pixel in a sequence of pixels, which is what, how photos and movies are created. It's pixelization. So how can I possibly detect whether that next word was written by me as a human being using a pen and paper or in a word processor or created by AI? It is not possible. So watermarking, which was an idea in the task order, was, again, the task order I'm referring to was about late 2023. And Noelle, I'd be curious if you have a similar view. I'm not sure, maybe I'm being controversial here, but it's just silly. It's just not technically feasible. So in some ways, yes, I know that NASA Soup are saying, did you use AI? And what the stock response I would suggest that people do? Yes, we used AI for certain activities, namely editing content, tightening up content. If you've ever used Microsoft Spell Check or any of the Microsoft,
like literally, if you're in a product, you're going to have to check that box.
You are
like
using
any
AI.
Product.
And then we could get into an esoteric debate about whether it's old style AI or a different type of model in AI. There are 20 plus different types of AI. And then you're just on a losing battle. So you just put in a stock. We were responding ourselves to an RFP and we put in the stock disclaimer. We used AI for certain activities, including editing and simplification of content, including initial first draft creation. Done. It doesn't matter. The government, on the other hand, should start and is already starting to use AI themselves in initiatives. Now, again, the government in various ways wouldn't be known for its innovation, but in certain parts is highly innovative. So that for sure is going to happen. There's going to be a down selection, or there will be parts of the down selection process and parts of the ultimate selection process which will leverage and lean on AI to inform, just like we're informed on the sell side, they will be informed on the buy side. That, make no doubt or make no bones about it, is definitely happening.
But it is definitely happening.
As long as we're all more like, if I submit an RFP as a response and it has statements in there, if I can't deliver on those statements, that's my fiduciary duty. That's my operational imperative. Like if I say I'm going to land a person to Mars in under 2 years, and it was either written or generated by AI, I still have got to freaking well land the person to Mars in 2 years.
You get them on the space station, but can you get them off?
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's not go there. The
RFP needs to be very clear about it.
Although I believe Elon is now to the rescue, so we're all good.
Of course he is. Different topic.
Let's not go that direction either. In any case,
but
that's
not getting into commercial
contrarian.
space travel on this spot.
Correct.
But let's get back to
I'm kind of curious. Noelle, would you agree with that? I'm kind of curious of your view on that. I'm not sure
I was very happy to hear you say that because I was like, I wonder what he's going to say. But yeah, 100%. Like when you made that kind of proposition of like, if the government spends any time at all on what it should do is enlighten them that 80% of their process is not usable. Is not useful use of human time. That's what it should do. Because these pages, like many of these pages, require zero changes over time. Like every time you submit an RFP, there's pages that never change. And those pages you should evaluate, like, why are you submitting those in PDF format or even physical paper format? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. So it's really more of a trigger to organizations. But yeah, I 100% agree that I don't think it matters at all. And in a world where what it reminds me of, especially because Instagram does it too, is how little organizations understand about what the letters AI means. Because when you say AI, I'm like, we've been using AI for a very long decades. Many of us at least 10 years to do all sorts of things. I mean, every time we have a conversation and Instagram pops up ads based on a conversation we had, like that is not a human doing anything. That's an algorithmic response. And it's been happening. So yeah, I think it's weird if organizations like, did you use AI for this? I'm like, well, what part, which one? Was it in a product I own? Did I have control over that model? Like, it becomes a very slippery slope. So yeah, I don't think it's a really great question. I think it might be good to have in every contract, how was AI used in the creation of this RFP, which is what you're doing proactively, right, Fergal? But I think having that checkbox, it actually is unfortunate because the people that have a very good idea will now be intimidated by that. It almost is like AI shaming in the form of responses. So people will be like, well, why do you want to know? If you want to know, maybe we shouldn't do that. And now they will be at a significant disadvantage. And then it becomes an ethical choice. Do you check that box or not check that box, knowing very well everyone is using AI? If you're using Word or Google to write your documents, you're using Adobe, they all have AI embedded. You can't get away from it. So asking, I mean, I don't know, is it more about like an ethical check on like, are you going to say yes because we know you are? I don't know. I don't understand why we would ask that question. I think it's a misunderstanding of the asker about what they really want in an answer. So I think it's really good advice to provide a disclaimer on everything that you do on the use of AI. And this goes to maybe what you're going to talk about with ethics. One of the pillars of ethical and responsible development is to be transparent, not only in your use, but in how you build, both as a consumer and a producer, being always transparent about how AI is being used. And it helps in two ways. One, it allows everyone to realize using AI is okay. Like it normalizes the use of AI instead of being like, I secretly use ChatGPT to build this thing. Like I see so many companies doing that. I'm like, normalize it because bad things happen in the dark. Like don't put it in the dark, put it in the light. But the other thing, of course, is that being transparent allows an organization to choose appropriately whether or not they want to use the AI that you're talking about or leveraging. It gives everyone the ability to make a conscious, intelligent decision about transacting. And right now, I don't feel like we're being that open about it, which is odd, especially because the model where many of us are using is called open AI, like anyway.
Right. Well, and, I always clue into the first word is artificial. It has to be made to be what it's intended to be.
Right.
I use the early analogy of, artificial banana flavoring does not taste like banana, so what do you do there? Are you okay with that? It doesn't taste like banana, or do you need it to taste like banana? And so again, sounds weird after I say banana 7 times, but it's how does the human use their own brain to determine if what they're doing is appropriate? Then is it accurate? And then is it ethical? And I tie it to, again, government contractors. We like the shortcuts. We like the easy buttons. This is nothing that gets done quickly or without a great deal of thought. I am all for getting through the administrative activities, the acronym checker. Those are things that we have been using that technology for a very long time. And obviously VisibleThread was one of the first to just make that job easy. Thank you so very much. But from there, talking about how do I build a weapon system? I'm going to ask AI? Nope, you should probably already know that if that's the question you plan on answering so that you can know whether that AI answer is accurate, truthful, and ethical. Because now I think, and again, I'm a cynic, if I'm using generative AI to develop a solution that the government is then evaluating using artificial intelligence, there's risk there. And what is the human's responsibility for making sure that A, all of that output is 100% accurate and doable by that company for the price that they're proposing at? Because if it's written well enough and it's priced appropriately, they will get the award. But can they do that work?
Yeah, but I mean, that's the same question I'd ask of the humans that overbid all the time. Like, I'd actually prefer it be an AI than because humans, like I watch them, what do they call it? Change order themselves into a project that they never should have been in the first place. But they had, instead of an AI, they just had a really good person, a silver-tongued devil, as they say, right?
Overpromising
so now,
is overpromising.
Jeff Bezos actually taught me this when I was at Amazon. He was like, he took out physical presentation. You weren't allowed to speak in meetings because people like me who are good speakers would always overshadow the introverted. And he was like, taking that away created an equalizing activity that equalized everyone. And I actually think of AI in the same way. It equalizes everyone. It allows someone not to just have a person who knows how to write a great proposal. Everyone now has the ability to write a great proposal, which is good. The burden now is on what what metrics of success are you looking for in that proposal? It's not going to be how well was it written. It's not going to be how cool does it sound. It's going to be what are the metrics and milestones? How quickly will you deliver? I think one of the other things about it is that the timeline to deliver on milestones shrinks in the world of AI. You don't get a year to deliver. You don't even get 6 months to deliver. In 2 weeks, you better be able to show that the value of what you're doing is on a trajectory of success. Like it should be very short. And this is, again, a lot of the research that's coming out now over the last 2 years of projects that we've done now shows that we can get results very quickly, not end results, but trajectory proving results. Proof is in the pudding results. And that is something that we've kind of taken on faith that teams will deliver. As you said, like, I mean, I guess you hit like who hurt me in the past. Like, I'm like, I don't want people to make promises or write checks that they can't cash. And that's what happens in boardrooms all over the world, especially when it comes to big projects where they're like, yeah, I got 100 people who can do that. And they haven't even hired anyone yet, right? Like, so I don't think AI is necessarily going to amplify that concern. I actually see a world where it allows everyone to participate in a more equalized way, because not just the fancy talker that, there's 10 of them in the industry and they just go like incestuously and work for other companies. Now everyone can get the benefit of those types of proposals. But the problem doesn't change because it's a human problem. The human will lie to get the deal. And that's I always say the tech, we've got great tech, but what we actually need is better humanity. Like the human actually has to make better choices. Because I don't think your problem is going to go away if we decide not to use AI to do that. I think the problem is actually humanity being willing to say what they can do and do what they say. And that's, maybe also existential.
It's extensively existential. And it's a problem in where I am as a consultant. We come across that all the time.
Yes.
How do I ethically tell my client, you're lying to me and I know it?
Yes.
How does an AI say this proposal is lying and I know it? So Fergal, can we build that level of trust in an AI system to evaluate? I'm going to say probably eventually, right? But what is happening right now? I think that from what you're seeing in your international, relationships that you're building, how do we keep that trust in the AI system, but reinforce the ethics of the human and how they're using that AI system?
So if I was to say that AI could solve even a small part of that issue, I would be selling you the Golden Gate Bridge, or I'd be whatever the phrase is, right? Nothing has changed and everything has changed. The nothing has changed thing is the people process thing. The bending of the truth, the proposition of solutions that aren't quite deliverable in a profitable margin or depending on change orders, whatever it is, that has nothing to do with AI. I think the AI is just basically getting you faster to the same old bell curve. By that I mean, if it used to take us 2 months to produce a proposal, and now with the benefit of AI, it takes us 2 weeks, in general, with the same people involved in either case, you're going to likely get the same level of crap or good. So you get faster to the point, but fundamentally it's a bell curve, and people will realign to approximately the same position on the bell curve that they were pre-AI. This is a slightly depressing point, but it is the point. That's why right now you'll see a lot of, let's say AI consultants or whatever saying, look, if you don't use it, you're going to be out of a job, quote unquote. Now that's an overstatement for sure. But if you don't start to use it, you will certainly not be as efficient as your neighbor who is using it. But if they were slightly of dubious character and lacked moral fiber before, they're going to be of the same after. AI will make no difference one way or the other. All it's doing, like any technology, is that it's actually helping you get two things, either more efficient or better quality outcomes. That's it. It's always the same kind of one or other or a combination. Mm-hmm. So I think people are people. We're all composed of the same DNA that we're, our entire, somewhat, putting religion aside, we are recycled DNA, the whole lot of us. And how we exist now is roughly the same, with the same characteristics of society as was, 10,000 years ago, and will be in 10,000 years. assuming we're still around and global warming hasn't knocked us off the perch. Who knows?
Yeah, Earth hasn't kicked us off
or some
yet.
asteroid has not knocked into us. But the point is that from a technology standpoint, technology is an enabling thing. It is generally designed to make our lives a little bit easier. The mobile phone has dramatically transformed society, and that has positives and negatives. And I think we're all familiar with both sides of that. Massively, incredibly positive in the sense of being able to access any information on the planet at flick of a switch. Equally, the addictive nature of social media and the bad effects it's having on kids. I mean, or all of us, actually. I was on a short break the other day in Spain, of all places, and I was looking around and I said, this is incredible. Everybody in a restaurant, I would say 2/3 of people were looking at mobile phones in a restaurant, in a setting which is, I think, pre-2007. So that's not great. This is a slightly philosophical point, but I think we need to be careful that we are people, and the things that attack our society as people are the things we need to be very careful of. I don't think Gen AI, honestly, is going to attack our society at its current point. Now, maybe that might change. I think we have to keep an eye on it, but right now it's way more positive than it is negative.
Yeah. Noelle, to add?
Oh my goodness. I wrote down as you were speaking, Fergal, that fear, and actually in the very beginning, that fear is a motivator. And people will use fear to motivate people to do things. And so obviously it is in an organization's best interest to let their employees know that if you don't figure it out, that you're going to get laid off, or worse, just lay off people. You know, it's kind of gladiator style. Like, lay off a bunch of people. Don't even say why, and just let the world build that narrative, right? If you don't tell the narrative, people will build their own. What I always like to remind people of is kind of the story of Blockbuster and Netflix, right? Like, right now you have a choice. You can be Blockbuster, you can be Netflix, and we know how it ends. Like, you know how it ends. It's not that those people were all of a sudden laid off. Like, it was a path that was chosen intentionally. And that's okay. You can totally, I mean, I talk to people that are entering retirement and they're like, and they're in tech, right? They're like tech mindful. And they're like, well, I mean, do I do this again? Do I go learn again? Do I start the cycle again? Like, I really thought I was going to just go off into the sunset and enjoy my retirement. And I'm like, it's a choice. You could be Blockbuster and just like drift off into nothingness and go garden, or you could hop on the train, but it is a choice that you make. And that choice means, just like Netflix, that you are on a continuous, aggressive cycle of innovation and change. And now it's faster than it's ever been before. But it's a conscious choice every organization has to make. And I find that even, especially in the government, whenever I go and talk to a government organization, they will always pre-deliver to me their narrative of, we're laggards and we're always the last and we don't ever do things first and we're blah, blah, blah. Like, you all probably know. And what I found is at the end of our workshops, they're almost always, like, I would say 70% of the time, to be fair, will say, how do we do this right now? To shock everyone else on the leader of that organization were like, how do we do this right now? Because I do think that there's a change in leadership that has been gratefully awaited, that leaders are realizing that we have stories like Netflix and Blockbuster. We have stories like Borders and Kodak, where the leadership was literally the deciding factor between living or dying. And now that decision, now we know how it all plays out. How are you going to equip your organization? And I think we have leaders, thankfully, that are willing to kind of say, well, let's at least get started. Let's at least move in this direction. But I do think we all need to be very aware of the fact that the fear narrative isn't a reality for most companies. Most companies are seeing AI implemented in their organization, generating the most prosperous cycles in their company than it's ever seen before, meaning that the percentage of ROI that they can achieve is achieved in a smaller amount of time than ever before in their organization. It isn't easy. It doesn't come lightly. You have to build responsibly. One of the biggest things, so I recently wrote a book with Wiley called Scaling Responsible AI from Enthusiasm to Execution. And it's all about how we all are baby tigers. You'll see there's a tiger on the cover. Like, baby tigers, we're all like, oh my gosh, it's exciting. But when you go to like execute, put it into production, there are just basics that people aren't thinking about. And I know Fergal's team thinks about this all the time, but how are you going to measure the success of your AI systems, whether you're a consumer, meaning you observe it in a product, or you're building products? And so, as maybe just things to think about, there is AI for that. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to use AI to check AI. And that's again coming from this mindset that it's like this single entity, like a god, like AI as one thing. I wouldn't want the right hand to know what the left hand is doing or whatever that saying is. I'm like, no, these are completely autonomous, separate, distinct separate entities. Like they do not know about each other. You absolutely want to use AI to check the integrity of your cybersecurity systems. You absolutely want to use AI to check whether or not you have grossly misstated, to your point earlier, Marcia, like how do we make sure that these contracts that we're, or RFPs that we're delivering don't grossly overstate our stated objectives or capabilities? Well, we've already delivered a bunch of RFPs. We know what good looks like. We can have a model that'll say, hey, before you send that, we call it nudging, not nagging. Like, hey, before you send that, I noticed that in section B and in section D, E, and double Z, you may have overstated this. This is where generative AI is beautiful. It won't say, you stink, this is awful, do it again. It'll say, I think you should look at it. And here are the top 3 things I would look at. Here are some of the things from your previous proposal. Generative AI is not building you the answer, to your point earlier, Fergal, right? We're pulling in data we already know about ourselves and reminding us at the most important moment that we think better than this. At Accenture, we called it one Accenture. When all of the different like areas of the business would come together in this beautiful moment and we deliver on the promises we make. But the challenge was it was an anomaly. This one Accenture. It was like when it happened, people were like, "This is one Accenture. It's happening." But AI can actually help you be you on your best day every day. And again, it's not how do you show up to someone else. It's just how do you do your own stuff better. It's not how do I build a product I can sell to someone else. It's how do I just improve my own, to your point, technology, processes, and people. And so it is a focus, I think, element. And I think there's a couple things, maybe one thing that I'll end this with, which is your models, we already know how they perform. We know how toxic they are. We know how racist and sexist they are. We know how many of them will hurt people accidentally or intentionally. And this data is available for every model that you use if you're in the 150 top models in the world. And that data is available at Stanford and at MIT. They've done benchmarks. Google just launched Frames, which is a RAG authentication benchmark, free on GitHub. My biggest fear and concern is that companies don't even know this when they start. They're on the blind baby tiger, roller coaster, and they don't even realize that they can check for the very thing in 6 months they're going to get hurt by, they could know on day one. And so that's why I think partnering with organizations that are, that know about this, that understand this, that can guide you on the questions to ask on day one, instead of waiting to day 2 in production and be an AI gone wrong story. I really think that, that's why I think both Fergal and I are so passionate about talking about this. Because, like a lot of people say they know AI right now. Very few people have actually built it and launched it in production. And I think, we represent part of that select few.
Learn from the experience of those who have experienced
build on the shoulders
it.
of giants.
Exactly. And I love that. I love that you brought it back to being optimistic, Noelle, and that you brought it back to the responsibility of the enterprise to know what they have and what they can offer with it, and to gut that check themselves, to sanity check, to ethics check, and to teach within their organization what is and is not appropriate. So Fergal, I'll just spin that over to you because I think Noelle put a big bow on this conversation, but sprinkle some glitter on it, Fergal. How do you see that in government contracting? Where's your optimism? Take us out.
I am very optimistic, but I'm equally realistic. And I think it's going to come back, and always does. This is the nothing changes bit. It's a people question. So, silos of people, teams not collaborating very well, silos of information. That's, Noelle described the one Accenture approach. That kind of almost, it's a cloudy day and a little bit of a ray of sunshine comes into a very large organization who's not used to that amazing enabling capability. It's just when you see this stuff. Now, it's easy for me. I have a relatively small organization, so I can make things happen either by diktat or by benign dictatorship is how I characterize it.
Yeah.
But, by encouraging people, gently cajoling, stick card, all that kind of stuff. I think organizations who genuinely have a perspective of looking forward, and they empower people to play with, it's probably the wrong way of putting it, but to actually experiment with AI. For instance, I was on a conversation this morning where I was encouraging my own people in our sales team, our marketing team, to use a thing called perplexity.ai, which is a very nice, I'm not sure if you use it, Noelle, but it's one of a number, and Google have an equivalent. But it's a search engine based on an interface that says, hey, query in natural language, and it'll give you the generated content and it'll cite its references. So it's a kind of a, Google searches, here are the top 10 links. Here's my answer, and I based it on this, and this. So this idea of, RAG, which I talked about earlier. But what is AI really good for in the concrete world of this area? So it's great for situations where you don't need exact answers. So an exact answer would be, do an intro describing my company's capacity and capability to actually win this piece of work. Okay, that's an intro exec summary type stuff. AI is phenomenal at getting you off the blank page for that. It's great at simplifying content. It's great at research, public domain research. Here's something in the public domain. Therefore, this is the one exception to the thou shalt not use public LLMs. When something is in the public domain already, there's very limited risk in that context. But again, it requires some thoughtfulness. It is not good and will never be good, very good, well, in my opinion, at 100% accurate, 100% repeatable challenges, of which there are many in life. And we talked about this earlier. So we just need to be a little bit conscious of that dividing line. I think if you start, and this is where we're seeing success, if you start with the challenges, and Noelle mentioned it earlier, what are the really painful things that I do day in, day out? What are the time-consuming things? Because if you actually take that perspective, what takes me a lot of time, can I now apply AI to that and get relatively go-ahead, relatively bright people to look at that problem in your organization? Not the most senior people. It's not a pecking order question. It's the question of who has capacity and ability to go off, be empowered, to put a finite time frame. Okay, spend the next week and actually come back. And of course, fit it between day-to-day activities, but good, ambitious people will do that. They'll always make it work. I think that's a really winning strategy. We do it a lot in VisibleThread. We empower people, or at least I like to think we do. We have innovation weeks. And what I'm doing more and more is cross-pollinating between various, sales, marketing, collaborating with CS, collaborating with engineering, which we probably, pre-COVID, we were more siloed structurally than we are now. And we're now 100% remote. So it's easier in ways to do this. Still requires FaceTime, but it's just that kind of idea of collaborating. So if I'm in, our customer's space and I'm a leader there, even at a mid-level, it doesn't really matter. I would basically empower people to spend a finite time box it, and see what you get at the end of the week. Just see what you get. If you get nothing, no problem. That's okay. That's truly what's called agile. That agile comes from that perspective of, it's scope, it's effort, and it's time. But if you time box something, then you get what you get at the end of that week or 2 week sprint, which is quote unquote agile approach. That is a great technique. If you're trying to fix a sales issue, if you're trying to fix some issue in terms of how you do competitive analysis, put a time box on it, put smart people, empower them to go play with things and see what you get at the end of that 2 weeks. It's a really, really effective technique if people are open to doing it. That's my degree of optimism. Is that optimistic? I'm not sure.
I think that's fantastic advice, is give the people the opportunity to take it where they need it to go for them, rather than say, here's a product, figure out how to use it. Figure out how to use it in a context that makes it easier, makes your job better, makes you more successful. That then helps, I think, the next person in line to be better at their job as well.
And the distinction, and we occasionally will meet a customer or two, no names, but where they have a very hierarchical approach to leadership, and everything is kind of top down. It's dictatorial. That organization, honestly, if you're working in that organization, I would encourage you to maybe evaluate some other options if possible. But that approach that I'm espousing will not work in that organization structure. It will work in a more creative structure. It's kind of like leadership, get out of the way, empower people to do things. and to actually figure stuff out. That's the best form of leadership in my view.
That's fantastic. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. We're at time for this episode, but a lot of this conversation actually springs back to the episode 2. So I definitely think there's some correlation between the theming that we're doing in these optimized podcasts this year. And I'm happy to see that, because as a practitioner and as a technician, both at the same time, it's important to be able to understand not just the human element, the technical element, but how that creates kind of the culture of the workplace, and bringing all those things together so that the positivity remains, the optimism stays in place, but it's sprinkled with a heavy dose of pragmatism. Just make sure you're doing it the right way, at the right time, and for the right reason. So I appreciate both of your perspectives on that, and I'll go ahead and wrap it up. In a world increasingly driven by artificial intelligence, the question remains, can AI truly replace the human touch in critical tasks of federal contracting? As we've explored in this episode, while AI offers significant advantages in terms of efficiency and analysis, it's essential to recognize its limitations and the irreplaceable value of human judgment. Stay updated on the latest developments in AI and in federal contracting. Be sure to subscribe and watch the Optimized podcast, and we'll continue to bring you insightful discussions and expert perspectives on these important topics. Fergal and Noelle, thank you so much for an enjoyable topic and conversation today. I really appreciate you.
It was great. Thank you. It was so fun.
Thanks so much, Marsha.
Take care.